Good morning, everyone. I am Attorney Mawuli Davis with the Davis Bozeman Johnson Law Firm, and we are here today on this historic day to file a historic lawsuit that seeks to address a very egregious taking of a life, not by just an individual, but by a system. And we seek to hold that system accountable on today. I want to introduce the very courageous family of Matthew Zadok Williams, a family who have been together through all of this pain, who have committed themselves not just for justice for Zadok, but for justice for all those who are similarly situated as Zadok was on that fateful day in April of 2021. We have here his mother, Ms. Chris Ann Lewis. We have his 5 beautiful, courageous sisters. We have uncles, cousins, nieces, nephews, and then you see these organizations that are here. Organizations who have been here since day one, who when the initial report was given from Dekalb County said something wasn't right. When the initial, very edited version of the video was released, the snippet, these organizations still said something wasn't right. And they've stood here with this family, specifically the Dekalb SCLC has stood with them. The George Floyd Committee stands with them. The Esther Project stands with them. Beacon Hill Black Alliance for Human Rights stands with them. Color of Change stands with them. The Black Futurist Group stands with them. Student organizers who've been organizing over at Morehouse and Spelman, they stand with them, and other community-based organizations continue to stand with this family. So the legal team, and we have assembled what we believe is a formidable legal team to fight this fight. We are fortunate to have with us the managing partner of our law firm, Attorney Robert Bozeman, who has, again, done everything in his power to pull together some of the best lawyers in the state of Georgia to be a part of our firm so that we can take on cases just like this. Cases that matter to the future of not just the state of Georgia, but the future of this country. And so we have with us, joining us, our law partner, Attorney Regine Gray. We also have joining us Attorney Desney Scaife. We have with us our law clerk, third-year law student, Daryl Ford. And then we also have joining us from our Savannah Statesboro offices, Attorney Francis Johnson. The crafters and the visionaries behind creating a suit that seeks to address this entire system are none other than our law partner, Attorney Harold Spence, and our co-counsel and friend and colleague, Leighton Moore. And this is the legal team that is so honored to represent this family, to represent this mother, to represent these sisters and cousins and all who love Zadok deeply. And so I want to take a moment for Attorney Francis Johnson to situate us in terms of this historic moment, why this lawsuit, the filing of this lawsuit, again, is not against a single officer, as you often see when we file civil rights section 1983 cases. Usually you will see this lawsuit filed against an individual officer who pulled the trigger. Dekalb County pulled this trigger. The system pulled the trigger. The system created the conditions that allowed Matthew Zadok Williams to be assaulted, shot, and then left to die in his own home. A homeowner, a Dekalb tax-paying homeowner who was having a mental health crisis, and all of the taxes that he and his family have paid should have paid for what we call CIT training. It is the common basic model as it relates to policing in America and mental health crises and officers being properly trained. All the statistics show that if you have your officers trained with CIT training, that they are less violent when they interact with those who are suffering from a mental health crisis. What we know is that at least one in five adults in America have experienced in the last year a mental health illness. 1 in 5. We're talking over 40 million Americans. So this isn't a single isolated incident that is just about this family and this beautiful young man who has been lost, but it is about the entire population, those who love family members who are suffering with mental health illnesses. That's what this seeks to address. And so with that, we have taken it upon ourselves to not just go after the individual officer, but to focus in through the Americans with Disabilities Act, the entire Dekalb County. And Leighton Moore and Harold Spence will walk you through the lawsuit, will walk you through the important points and facts that we know to be true because it's a matter of public record about how Dekalb failed in their duty to provide the necessary training to not just protect Zadok, but to protect the officers, to protect the community, and to protect those who would be similarly situated as Zadok, as each and every day officers are coming into contact with those suffering from a mental health illness. With that, I'll have Attorney Francis Johnson come up to situate us. He will be followed by Leighton Moore, who will discuss the suit, then Attorney Harold Spence. Then you will hear from Mom, this mother who has made it her mission. And we're clear that we're in a different phase, but she's been outside in the rain. She's been outside with a bullhorn. She's been at the police department. She's been down at the courthouse steps. She has met with district attorneys, with police, with commissioners. She's made it clear that her baby's life mattered. And she has lived and walked this. And so we're grateful for her courage and her tenacity. Because what we see so often in these cases is the breaking down of those who are in the fight. But thankfully, this family has grown stronger in their faith and in their commitment to justice. And you will then hear, after Mom, you will hear from the sister, one of Zadok's 5 sisters, Zadok Williams, and then we will take questions. Attorney Johnson.
So proud to stand with this family, and I stand not just as an attorney with Davis Bozeman Johnson Law, but also as chairman of the New Georgia Project. And it is not lost that we are standing in a space dedicated to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, an organization created because the conditions by which workers found themselves were untenable, were inconsistent with the promises of this democracy. And from this space and our offices next door, lots of organizations are doing the work that this family has been doing, of organizing to change America that she might be what she promises to be. When it comes to the Americans with Disabilities Act, from voting to accommodations in public spaces and all things in between, the promises of that act are going to be tested. The metes and bounds of what people can expect, citizens can expect from it in this lawsuit. And so from this place, which has been a strong place of organizing for the collective good, for the improving of the human condition, we are happy to launch this historic lawsuit, which we think will have national ramifications about the role of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the interplay between agencies that have to interact with the public, like the Dekalb County Police Department and other departments similarly situated in this country. So from this place of organizing, from someone who is organized in this place, thank you to this family for what you've done, demonstrated again. The best of America will not be left to politicians who've dodged you over the years, but will be left to the hands of the citizens who will make this country what she ought to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Lane.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Attorneys Davis and Johnson have said before me, how grateful we are to this family for their courage in standing against a system that deprived their loved one of basic human rights. This lawsuit is about change, and it's based on a statute that was enacted to produce change, the Americans with Disabilities Act. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires governments to operate their programs in a way that respects the basic human rights of persons with disabilities, including mental health disabilities. They're supposed to do that by providing reasonable modifications of their policies and procedures, and also by providing reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities in individual settings. Dekalb County failed in this mission. Dekalb has known for years that it did not provide adequate training and support to its officers when they're performing custodial arrests of persons with mental illness. And this is a major problem in Dekalb. Dekalb has a bigger problem with arresting people with mental illness than other places do. Dekalb's own police chief stated years ago that Dekalb County operates in the Dekalb County Jail, the largest mental health facility in the southeastern United States. Most of those people get there by being arrested by a Dekalb County police officer. So Dekalb knows that it needs to adequately train its officers to perform those arrests in a safe way that respects the rights, the legal rights of the persons being taken into custody. Matthew Zadok Williams was suffering a mental health crisis on the date in question, but Dekalb didn't adequately respond. Dekalb didn't respect his basic human rights and his safety. Dekalb sent an officer there who was not adequately trained, didn't have basic training for how to de-escalate the situation and avoid violence. And Dekalb didn't provide that officer with adequate support. The CIT model that Attorney Davis mentioned requires not just adequate training for the individual officers, but it also requires that they be supported by a team of mental health professionals that's adequately funded to respond on all shifts and in all precincts. Dekalb didn't have that. It had a mobile crisis unit that was staffed part-time with one nurse and one officer for the entire county. That's not sufficient. And Matthew Zadok Williams is not here with us today because of Dekalb's failings. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Spencer.
Good morning. How we train police, how we deploy them once trained, and the rules of engagement by which they operate in a very real sense reflect our values as a society and as a community. The days are long gone when police officers would go to a scene, guns a-blazing, and then figure it out after the carnage had ended. We know that there is a better way. While there may be a natural tension between police and citizens they encounter, it doesn't have to be a mutually exclusive circumstance where either the police officer leaves that encounter alive or the citizen leaves that encounter dead. As a society, we have evolved, we've grown, we've learned. And police practices have to reflect that evolution, have to reflect that growth, have to reflect what we have learned. And we have learned that with proper and appropriate training, that we can achieve both ends, where a police officer can leave an encounter healthy and whole, and the citizen experiencing a mental health crisis can similarly leave that encounter healthy and whole. Often we are encouraged by clients we represent. And I have to say, I'm truly honored to stand with this family. They encourage us, they enrich us, and we are better for being a part of this effort with them. And we are honored again to pursue this journey toward justice with you. Thank you.
Before I bring family members forward, I want to point something out, and it's very important for the media to consider this. What video continues to be shown has nothing to do with this lawsuit. I want you all to hear this. It's important. This is something that the legal team and the family have talked about. The video that continues to be shown is the one where he has a mental health crisis and he runs after the officer and his pants are falling down. You can stop showing that because that is not when he was in fact shot and left to die. You can stop. It's okay now. We know that you have to be balanced, but let's not continue to attempt to shame those who have mental health issues by showing his pants falling down. What the focus is that he was inside for at least 15 minutes and the place was surrounded. Inside of his home, the place is surrounded. What does that say? What does that mean? Is that there is no need to go busting in. That there was time to implement and to consider reasonable accommodations because every officer there, and we have documented evidence, recognized that he was suffering from a mental health crisis. Every officer, that is without question. So once everyone knows it, then what should have kicked in was then how should we respond to someone with a mental health crisis when none of us are in any danger because he's on the other side of a locked door, barricaded inside, and we're outside. How should we respond? What accommodations should he receive? What accommodations should any American citizen suffering with mental health illness receive when they're locked in their home and having a crisis? We know the policies and procedures of Dekalb County say that a barricaded person, SWAT should have been contacted. And with SWAT, there would have been a trained negotiator that would have come out to de-escalate the situation so that he could walk out alive. So it's very important that we wanted to make that point, and we encourage you, take the lawsuit, look through paragraphs 154 and beyond, and really focus your attention on all of the history of Dekalb County, knowing how many individuals they were going to encounter with mental health illness and how they chose not to spend the money, to invest the money. What we say about society is that our values are reflected in our budget. Where counties, governments spend money are an indication of where they place their values. They did not spend the money to get every DeKalb County officer CIT trained, and they could have, and they knew they should have. And every day that passes by without them investing in the citizens of DeKalb County, there will be more tragic losses of life. And the great joy of what Zadok's future could have been has been snatched away because the values of DeKalb County have been so misplaced. With that, I'd like Mom and all of the sisters, would you all come?
I'm Zadok's mother. And on April 12th, 2021, Nobody should have died. Zadok was only 35 years old. He was my only son, and he was my baby. My husband and I had 5 girls trying to have this boy. He was everything to us. I mean, everything. He had never even made a sandwich for himself until he was 19 years old. He suffered from a mental health illness. It should not have been criminalized on April 12, 2021. Instead of him meeting death, being threatened with his life, Dekalb County, the system, failed my son. All officers, because they have in their hands the power to take a life, must have critical intervention training. That's a must. If they're not, take the guns away. All counties, cities, municipalities should have medical crisis units that are fully funded with a sufficient amount of staffing to handle the needs of their area, which DeKalb County did not. They failed my son. They failed the police officers that were there. And they have failed this county. I don't want any other mother to feel this devastating pain that every waking moment I feel. I don't want any other family to suffer the loss that we have in this family. It has to stop. It's time for the system to make that change. It's time. No one else with a mental health should be criminalized and killed. Thank you.
I'm Dekalb Williams. I'm the 4th sister of Zadok, and he was my best friend. He was all of our best friends. Zadok lived in Dekalb County his entire life. He went to elementary in Dekalb, then high school. So many of Zadok's first moments happened right in Dekalb County. Dekalb is where he became a registered voter and voted for the first time. Dekalb is where he had his first date. Dekalb is where he became a first-time homeowner. Zadok lived in Dekalb County because that is where he felt the most safe and comfortable. But Dekalb County is also where the system failed him on April 12th of 2021 due to insufficient CIT training. There isn't a street that I can't go down now in Dekalb where I'm not flooded with beautiful memories of my brother. I remember us cycling up the Arabian Mountain Trail. He would always try to race me up those steep hills because he was so competitive. We'd hit up every pizza joint in the county in pursuit of the perfect pizza, which every pizza was perfect for him because he was such a foodie. I remember us swimming, spending the entire summers just swimming. He would break the rules and backflip into the deep end. We would see how long we could hold our breath under the water. But now all of those beautiful memories have been tainted due to Dekalb's lack of support, their lack of funding, and seemingly their lack of concern for the mentally ill in their county. Mental illness has become a national epidemic in our country. If only Dekalb County had taken heed to this, they would have had the proper processes in place and my brother would still be alive today, creating more memories with us. In this country, there is no reason for anyone to die because they had a mental health crisis. But it happened to my little brother in Dekalb, and that has to change. Zadok's death has devastated my family in ways that I can't even articulate. But we continue to garner our strength in God in hopes that we will get justice and that we will continue to advocate for change and mental health reform in Dekalb. We pray that we will be the last family to stand before you grieving the loss of a loved one due to simply him being mentally ill. To us, Zadok was so much more than his mental illness. Zadok was our saint. He was our knight in shining armor. He was that sunshine on a cloudy day. He was that shoulder that we can cry on, that ear to listen to. He was our biggest supporter, my personal hype man. He also was our mover, our babysitter, our food critic, our word nerd that we could never be in Scrabble. Zadok was our only brother, our baby brother, and we would never forget him and never stop advocating for him and mental illness reform in DeKalb.
We want to point out that Zadok reached out for help on March the 16th. He called 911 from his home, and he asked, send an ambulance. He asked for help. There were officers who came out that day. They were there for 90 minutes. They didn't generate a police report. They didn't send the MC unit, which is the crisis unit that could come out, as Attorney Moore shared with you all. So understaffed, they can only come out in evenings, and they only have a psychiatric nurse part-time. But he called for help on March the 16th. Think about it, 3 weeks before this happened on April the 12th. If on March 16th, they would have just used the training to engage him, to give him the help that he needed, then we would not be standing here either. And so we want you to look at both of those dates that are listed in the complaint that lay out what happened leading up to this, so that you could see this wasn't just a one-day incident, but this built up not just over those 3 weeks, but over the years of DeKalb's neglect for training for those officers dealing with individuals with mental health illness and during the mental health crises. We will take questions. I also wanted to recognize Mr. Jimmy Atchison. His dad is here. Mr. Atchison represents the Georgia Moms United and has lost his son due to police violence, and he continues to stand in solidarity with this family and with families across Georgia who have lost loved ones at the hands of police. Yes.
I don't know if this is a question for you or Mrs. Williams, but knowing about that March 16th incident now, you know, the initial story we heard is they did not know this was his home. They did not know he was in mental health crisis. And you have very specific evidence now that the officers on scene knew both of those things, right? Can you talk about that?
Correct.
And Mrs. Williams, can you react to that as well?
The officers, one of the officers who came out on the March 16th came back out on April 12th and acknowledges, and we lay it all out in the complaint, acknowledges, I've been here before, I do think he lives there, because there were the individual citizens who reported this misinformation, that he didn't live there, that he was homeless, that he was squatting, things that were easily refutable by the officer who had been there for 90 minutes 3 weeks before. And so knowing all of what the narrative that they attempted to paint initially, and then having this evidence that directly contradicts the elected officials as well as the appointed police is troubling. And that's why this is, again, Dekalb County is the sole defendant, because this is bigger than any one individual. This is the entire county that attempted to really misdirect this whole community and misdirect the entire public with that first narrative they put out. So,
Not only did the officer that responded to the call know that my son lived there, but if they had just asked his name, just ask his name, He was no threat to anyone. He was behind a barricaded, bolt-locked door. Just ask him his name. That's a disregard right now, and a disrespect to who he was.
That's one of the things, what Ms. Lewis raised is one of the things that is in the training, is that you want to establish rapport by asking the person's name. They never do that, and then they go for, again, it's based on this lack of training, they don't seek to establish, hey, what's your name? They have enough time to ask his name and say, hey, let's run that. They run his name, and then it comes back to his home, and then it gives everyone a chance to reflect, like, oh, okay, wait a minute, this is his home. All right, so let's move a little differently. He's in his home, let's see what, that didn't happen because that seems like a very simple thing to do, but if you're not trained on that, you're not trained to de-escalate. Instead, you are moving in this militarized way, and you at least these kinds of results.
Can the family share what this entire process has been like, continuing to seek justice?
Well, I'm Beulah Williams. I'm after Dr. Beulah Williams. I'm Matthew's third sister. And just from the start, there was confusion. There was false evidence that was presented to the media at Dekalb County. There was mental health shaming, which is horrible. My sisters and I, we went through 10 hours of body cam footage. 10 hours of body cam footage. So if you want to know what it was like to see your brother shamed in the first place, and then he's in the comfort of his own home, try to de-escalate. He tried to de-escalate the situation. He tried to de-escalate the situation. He used words such as, can we speak cordially through the door? Can you put your gun down, sir? If they had just treated him like a human instead of a dog, he would be alive now. A human. In this country, we care more about animals than we care about certain people who are marginalized in this country, and it's a shame. So when you ask what it's been like for the family, it's been horrible. We have post-traumatic stress syndrome. We were fine last week, but now we have to come and do this, and we're going to do it, and we're going to see it to the end because we love him so much. I named my first son Zadok because I love my brother so much. He helped us so much. He was like the light of our life, and now he's gone. So it sucks. Thank you.
You guys mentioned, I don't know, maybe for the family or for the attorneys, but you want to see systematic change, that this is a Dekalb County issue. Last year, DA Sherry Boston said she's not pursuing criminal charges to the officers involved. Do you worry that without that criminal push, that this is a civil lawsuit, will it have the same weight to actually enact that systematic change that you want?
Obviously, we were disappointed. The family was absolutely devastated that District Attorney Boston chose not to criminally prosecute any of the officers. We believe that this historic filing will be just that, historic, in that the courts have not clearly decided whether the ADA applies to police when encountering and arresting an individual with mental health. It's groundbreaking. I don't want us to miss that. That this is what we think this could lead us to ultimately a Supreme Court decision that says the ADA applies. That's where this may end up. That's how far we're prepared to go. And that's what our focus is. So, we have our role. Sherry Boston had her role. We will not fail at ours.
For the family, Is there anything that you want families out there watching to know that have lost a loved one tragically to police violence?
I would like to say to families who have lost a loved one to police violence, hold on to your hope. Hold on to your hope, because there is a change that's coming. There's a change that's gonna come. And I understand the grief, and I'm gonna tell you it would never get better, but you will learn to live with it. Hold on to hope.
In terms of CIT training or anything specific, like, what would you have liked to have seen? I mean, on that March date, on that April date, can you be specific about like where that change actually needs to go?
Well, here are some things. On the March date, there could have been some record created of the fact that there was a mental health crisis happening at this address with this person. I mean, 911 was called, officers responded. One of the officers who responded actually had CIT training, incidentally, indicating that it's a bigger systemic change that we really need. That officer had it, he just didn't use it. And Dekalb didn't have broader systems in place to make it usable. Dekalb didn't keep track of mental health arrests. They don't keep that on the map. There's a national accrediting agency, CALEA, that has mental health accreditation that local jurisdictions can get if they keep those data. Other jurisdictions do it. CAB doesn't do it. Following up on the April 12th encounter, all the officers knew that they were dealing with a mental health crisis. Sergeant Perry stated that he tried to call the MCU on his way to the scene because he knew it was a mental health crisis that he was responding to. And yet he didn't have the de-escalation training, and crucially, he didn't call in somebody who did. The MCU never responded. He never called SWAT. No one with adequate training responded. So if they're not going to provide the CIT training to their officers, at least they need to have a system in place where someone who does have adequate training can respond to the scene, de-escalate it, and keep the officers and citizens safe. Right? I mean, Sergeant Perry claims that he shot because he was afraid of being stabbed, because Zadok had a knife in his hand and they knew that. Well, if you look at the video, he wasn't in danger of being stabbed at the moment. But he would never have had that fear if he hadn't escalated the situation by kicking the door in. As people have said over and over today, Zadok was behind a locked door. This didn't have to happen if someone with adequate training had responded to the scene.
And one thing that is illustrative of this lack of training, you heard that he wasn't ever even asked his name. There was no effort to try to calm the situation. But what does the officer say? Among the most inflammatory things that you could say to somebody experiencing a mental health crisis, brother, you don't have to die today. What kind of training would have an officer make that kind of remark to someone undergoing a mental health crisis that you know about? And so this is, in a nutshell, that one statement is illustrative of the type of problem that we have here. Had proper procedure been followed, what would have happened? You would have had the SWAT team to come out. You would have had a trained negotiator to come out. And an officer's fatigue at the scene, concluding that I've waited long enough, so I'm going to go ahead and start shooting because I don't want to wait any longer. That shouldn't be the default position. That evidence is a lack of training as well. Call SWAT, have the trained negotiator come in, and everyone leaves that day. And instead of the family being here criticizing Dekalb, maybe this family would be here saying that Dekalb did what it was supposed to do, and Zadok got the help that he needed, and he's with us today. Now, that still doesn't mean he won't cheat against his sister when they're engaging in their competitive sports if he was here today. But he'd be alive for them to create future memories with him. And again, don't lose sight, as Attorney Davis said, of the real issue here. It's the systemic problem with the lack of training. And a lack of training also breeds a lack of accountability when you don't follow the process.
If the attorneys and the family address two questions. One is the precedent for this type of lawsuit. You talked about it being an historic lawsuit that could go all the way up to the Supreme Court. To what extent has it been filed like this before, a lawsuit about a fatal police shooting citing the ADA? And then secondly, could you help us understand more of what he was dealing with? Did he have a diagnosis, for example?
Okay, so first, there was a filing in California, the Sheehan suit. They filed an ADA claim along with a 1983 claim. Judge in the Ninth Circuit determined that the ADA should apply to policing. However, the 1983 claim resulted in them motion for summary judgment in the case not moving forward to the Supreme Court. And so we were intentional about focusing just on the ADA claim and filing the ADA claim because we want that focus. We were very clear. We did not want to just name individual officers and give the county an opportunity to get out. We want the county front and center in ways that they typically are not in these situations. Secondly, Zadok did not have a quote-unquote diagnosed mental health that is known by the family, which isn't uncommon. In fact, when we look at all of the statistics around the country, many citizens who are suffering from mental health illness and crises are going undiagnosed. The reality is that beginning in the 1950s, and this is going a little far back, but I think it's important for citizens to understand, beginning in the 1950s, as they began to strip away psychiatric hospitals and other facilities, the police became frontline first responders to mental health crises. And then they did not provide adequate community mental health facilities. And so this is the result. We see all of so many citizens who, again, almost 20 to 25% at some point will have a mental health illness, either in a breakdown. In 2018, over 11 million had a severe mental illness. 11 million Americans. I mean, those numbers, this isn't something that this country can put your head in the sand and ignore. Our family members, all of us have family members, and that's why these community advocates continue to stand. All of us have a family member or more that has a mental health illness that is undiagnosed. And how do we want them treated? We want them treated with love and care and ensure that they are able to get the help that they need. And unfortunately, Dekalb County and the broader system has not built the necessary safety net to catch our loved ones and ensure that they are able to live productive lives.
What has been the response from the county throughout this process?
They haven't had a response. They haven't had an adequate response. I haven't seen any indication that they've made a commitment that we're going to get all of our officers CIT trained by this day. I haven't seen that announcement. If you all have, let me know. At some point, you would think it would trigger. They would realize. They would understand. They would be concerned enough to make a change. So when they don't, these kinds of accountability actions are necessary.
Well, yesterday, I understand legislators introduced 4 police accountability bills at the state capitol, one of which requires police de-escalation training, and others include adding additional procedures for ethical policing. So, what do you have to say, I guess, in terms of that effort as it relates to this?
Pass it. Get it passed. We have on so many different fronts, Attorney Spence, Attorney Bozeman, our firm we haven't just been filing lawsuits to file lawsuits because there's an economic advantage. We've been filing lawsuits and trying to create policy as a firm that changes the direction. We fought so hard to just get ice tubs for sports, for youth sports. They couldn't even pass that. Who wouldn't pass putting an ice tub for children not to have heat stroke while they're at sporting events? So just because it's been introduced, our firm is very clear. That doesn't mean that they're gonna get it passed. They get it passed, this family, all of us will stand down there and applaud them and say, good, and let's keep pushing and keep moving and keep building the necessary network to help those with mental health. So, great talk. Now it's time for action. We thank you all for coming. And again, we repeat this on behalf of our managing partner, Attorney Robert Bozeman, and our entire firm, and on behalf of Attorney Leighton Moore. It has been and will continue to be our absolute honor to represent the family of Matthew Zadok Williams until we win and are victorious in changing and transforming this system. We will forever stand with them until we win and after. Thank you all very much.
Colleagues, and Matthew. Something